not afford to say. Junie's said, move value faster than fear. Malik's, protect reserves without worshipping them. Alma's, a threshold is holy. Do not let urgency impersonate wisdom. I spread Mara's papers across the listening table. Okay, I said, if this is real, we use it. So we turned the switchyard into a chamber. The front room became chamber 1. Not dramatic, not mystical, just honest. We cleared the new arrivals table and taped up butcher paper. Not the old need, have checked today yet. First, we made 3 columns. What I have, what I owe, what I can promise, without lying that last one, changed the room immediately. People are used to crisis, asking them for nobility. Mara's chamber asked for precision. A man from Tower 2 started to write that he could drive evac trips all night, then crossed it out and wrote, can do 3 trips if someone else covers insulin run after midnight. A woman from the bakery wrote, have bread until freezer fails. Oh, landlord Friday. Can promise soup for 20 if someone brings fuel. I wrote, have shop, paper, candles, turntable, back room, lockbox, grief, and 1 bad knee. Can promise the doors stay open while the floor stays dry. Alma read that and didn't comment, which was how I knew it had passed inspection. At the bottom of the butcher paper, in thick marker, Malik wrote Mara's first rule. You cannot be free on borrowed breath. No one argued with it. The back room became chamber 2. This was Junie's kingdom. She built flow maps out of blue painter's tape, index cards, and 1 library stamp kit we found in a drawer. She marked routes for bike couriers, shaded buildings with working outlets, listed which elders needed elevator checks before dark, and sorted all incoming offers by whether they actually moved something essential. Not every offer is flow, she said, slicing a strip of tape with her teeth. Some people just want to be seen offering. That a chamber rule too? I asked. It is now. Here Mara's second line went up. Wealth that does not circulate becomes poison. We put it above the medicine shelf. Then the first shadow showed itself. A man in a linen rain shell came in from Harborside carrying 3 cases of bottled water and a face trained by money to appear benevolent at camera distance. He said he was willing to release inventory if we could verify who would post about his private preparedness service once the network stabilized. Junie looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she took a marker, wrote poison on a scrap of cardboard, and set it on top of the water cases. He left with all 3. Nobody missed him. Around 9, I opened the smaller envelope marked archivist. Inside were cards tabbed by suit. System diagnostic, flow and timing, risk and leverage, truth and alignment. Each had 1 instruction, typed and cut by hand. The first one I pulled read, what is being mistaken for disorder? Because it is informal? We all stared at it. Then Malik said South Bank. And that was the whole city in 1 answer. By midnight, the listening room became chamber 3. This was the hardest one because love sounds unserious until you have to allocate consequences. Malik laid out the flood maps. I laid out Mara's Commonade notes. Alma stood with her arms folded and read both like a judge deciding whether language itself had come to court wearing a tie. Mara had built a parallel model beside Civic Pulse. Same city, different assumptions. Not, where is the tax base strongest? But where does collapse cascade fastest into human damage? Not, which districts are premium assets? But which districts hold the most people one missed shift away from ruin? Not, what stabilizes investor confidence? But what keeps medicine cold, keeps buses running, keeps kitchens open, keeps children supervised, keeps low-wage workers alive enough to reopen every gleaming district that mistakes itself for self-sustaining? At the top of her notes she had written, systemic love is not sentiment. It is infrastructure choosing not to eat the people who feed it. Alma exhaled through her nose. That woman was mad enough to be useful. She was useful enough to get killed, I said. No one corrected me. The official city model had already begun pushing alerts. Optimize purchases. Upgrade assistance tier. Dynamic routing fee active. Hydration price window updated. Shadow logic. Hidden leverage. The corruption layer dressed as convenience. Junie started calling it what Mara had called it in the margin notes, the Twilight Zone, the place where systems pretended to help while quietly converting panic into premium segmentation. Against that, the chamber had only stupidly human tools. Truth, paper, old routes, public accounting. Who had a van? Who had asthma? Who was lying? Who was tired enough to make a bad decision look noble? My own BFP, if Mara's little formula meant anything, should have been decent. Pattern reader archetype, 61 start. Stability variable. But grief kept knocking the modifier sideways. Every time I saw a hallway, I thought of Nico. Every time an alert chirped, I imagined him being moved 3 places farther down a list. That Mara had written in one margin was resistance to, not moral failure, just distortion. What you refuse to feel will charge interest. I hated that one. At 1 in the morning, the rain turned serious. Junie's flow board filled. Malik's repair list doubled. Alma started rationing not supplies but promises. Then the second archivist card came out. Junie pulled it. Who has spare capacity no one counts because it is not billable? This time the answer came fast. Church basements. The barber's back room. The bodega's chest freezer before dawn. Teenagers with bikes. Grandmothers who knew every diabetic in 3 buildings. Record stores with stationary tables and doors that locked. I looked around the switchyard then, the books, the paper, the old turntables, the ugly fluorescent stockroom light, the note wall growing crooked with ink and urgency, and understood what Mara had been trying to save. Not evidence. A framework. A way of entering disaster without letting the people who profited from it define reality first. By the time the flood warnings escalated, everyone coming through the door was entering the chamber whether they knew the name or not. They counted honestly. They circulated what they could. They made the next decision as if the weakest person in the room was part of the math. And when we finally got to pump 7 in the dark, soaked through and furious, I understood why Mara had left the protocol with me. Civic Pulse had a dashboard. We had rules. When Leora said Harborside had to be protected because it preserved the tax base, I heard Mara's voice from the tape as clearly as if she were standing beside me. That is not stability. That is appetite in a blazer. So when Malik put his hand on the manual wheel and Junie projected the documents across the concrete wall, what moved through the crowd was bigger than outrage. It was chamber logic reaching the point of consequence. Malik with capital integrity, refusing collapse. Junie with liquidity flow, moving truth faster than spin. Alma with leverage restraint, calling thresholds before panic could. Me with transparency truth, naming the lie in public where it could no longer earn interest. And Leora, finally, standing inside the part of the chamber that mattered most. The moment Resistance XP stops looking like sophistication and reveals itself as surrender. When she gave up the badge and named the old rail cut, that was the first clean point she'd scored all night. Not redemption. Acceptance. Which Mara had warned us was the only kind of growth that multiplied. A manual broadcast time chamber edition inserted chapter. The chamber hour. In the basement archive, after Lena found her father's index card about asking callers what they smelled, she kept digging. The carton labeled Mora Nights 2007, 2012 had a false bottom. Under the tapes and pledge drive envelopes was a dented cigar box wrapped with electrician's tape. On top, in her father's blunt block letters, someone had written, "Time chamber rules for nights when the city loses the plot." Lena carried it upstairs like something unstable. Inside were raffle stubs numbered in black Sharpie from 37 to 93 for paper bands marked with drawn symbols, and a stack of laminated note cards with colored tabs. On the lid, taped crooked, was a typed sheet that had yellowed at the corners. Everybody enters trouble with a different starting load. Measure honestly. Do not worship advantage. Do not romanticize strain. Pull once. No redraws. Below that, SPP equals starting power percentage. Lena read it twice and then laughed under her breath. Of course her father, who mistrusted both management and mysticism in equal measure, had turned mutual aid into a radio game severe enough to keep people from lying to themselves. When the outage hit Friday night and Tomas kicked the old transmitter awake, Lena brought the box to the folding table in the basement. Yumi looked from the box to the dead monitors upstairs and said, "I cannot tell whether this is genius or cult adjacent. Family resemblance," Lena said. Mrs. Bernal adjusted her glasses. "Read the rules." So Lena did. Every entrant draws an SPP once. Starting power is not moral worth. It is an honest load estimate. Good, Mrs. Bernal said. Too many people confuse burnout with virtue. Tomas reached in first and pulled a ticket. 82, Yumi whistled. That tracks. He shrugged. I fix old machines. They like me. Mrs. Bernal drew 79. Also tracks, Yumi said. Mrs. Bernal ignored her. Yumi drew 54, looked offended for exactly 1 second, then grinned. Fast but breakable. Fair. Lena drew 63. Not heroic. Not fragile. Just enough. A fifth ticket stayed face down on the table. Wenhao came into the basement later in his raincoat and his management voice. Mrs. Bernal slid the last one toward him without explanation. He stared at her, then flipped it over. 41, nobody said anything. To his credit, he didn't ask for another. Under the raffle stubs were the 4 bands. A shield, a river, a scale, an eye. Lena knew before she read them who belonged where. Capital integrity went to Tomas. He was reserves continuity, load-bearing ugly competence. Liquidity flow went to Yumi, who could move information across a city faster than any corporate stack once she trusted the source. Transparency truth went to Lena. The title embarrassed her, which was probably why it fit. Mrs. Bernal took leverage restraint and slid it into her notebook as if she had been issued an official title she'd already been doing unpaid for 20 years. Hal got nothing at first. He stood there with the 41 ticket in his fingers while the station upstairs tried and failed to sound calm through synthetic continuity voice. What am I supposed to do with this? He asked. Mrs. Bernal capped her pen. Begin where you actually are. On the back of the typed sheet was the formula. BFP equals archetype SPP stability modifier. Yumi read it over Lena's shoulder and laughed. Your dad was a menace. Accurate, Lena said. But the longer Lena looked at it, the less it felt like a gimmick. Tomas, engineer, archetype, 82 start, absurdly high stability under pressure, had more usable power in that basement than the entire automated overnight stack. Yumi, creator-reporter archetype, 54 start, great speed but variable stamina, could flood the city with signal as long as someone protected the edges of her bandwidth. Lena, producer archetype, 63 start, stable until guilt got involved, could hold the line if the line stayed human. Her father had even written a note under the equation. Don't assign people work based on what flatters them. Assign it based on what they can carry without becoming dangerous. Then came the chamber rules themselves. Chamber I, personal sovereignty, you cannot be free on borrowed breath. Lena said it aloud into the room, and the room changed. No cloned voice, no sponsor copy, no repeating a rumor as if it were first-hand, no speaking for a block you hadn't stood in, no promise on air that depended on some invisible later rescue. For the station, borrowed breath meant synthetic authority. The smooth fake intimacy of a voice that sounded local because someone had licensed the cadence, but not the life. Lena looked up toward the ceiling, where Sable's continuity engine was probably still trying to output manageable conditions. Good, Yumi said. The bots can stay upstairs. Chamber 2, contributive flow wealth that does not circulate becomes poison. Mrs. Bernal underlined that one twice in her notebook and rewrote her headings on fresh paper. Need have verified, but now the board widened. Not just food, not just batteries, not just medicine, signal, wall outlets, warm rooms, lift help for elders. How many gallons of fuel, which hallway lights still worked, who had seen the ice with their own eyes, which rumor had already wasted 30 people's time. Information is inventory tonight, Tomas said. Only if it moves, Lena answered. That was when Yumi found the laminated note cards. They were tabbed by the same 4 colors as the suits. System diagnostic flow and timing risk and leverage truth and alignment at the bottom of one card in her father's handwriting. Archivist pull, 1 per cycle. Guidance only, no miracles. Yumi drew the first. Ask what the air smells like. She smiled like someone had just handed her scripture. The second card Lena pulled an hour later. Ask what the light is doing. Place verifies faster than opinion. And that became the rule on air. When the first caller came through, Lena didn't ask for cross streets first. She asked, what does the air smell like where you are? Bleach and microwave noodles, said the nurse at the West Side Clinic. Real. Second caller, detergent and wet dog. Real. Third, dust, old carpet, pennies. Real enough to make the hair rise on Lena's arms. Each honest answer was its own kind of acceptance XP, though her father hadn't called it that in the broadcast notes. He'd called it clean gain. People grounding themselves in place made the whole system stronger. The line got better. The board got better. The city listening in got better at noticing the difference between witness and style. The shadow layer hated that. Upstairs, the network kept trying to retake the signal. Branded calm. Sanitized summaries. Sponsor-safe phrasing. The ad logic wanted to hoard credibility while outsourcing risk downward, just like every bad system Lena had met in her adult life. That, in the chamber language, was corruption by hidden leverage, not just money. Priority disguised as inevitability. Smoothness mistaken for trust. The server rack fed before the local generator because somewhere a spreadsheet had decided synthetic continuity was more valuable than occupied attention. Wenhao came back downstairs after watching the listener numbers climb on Yumi's stripped-down mirror feed. He looked less like management and more like a man who had just discovered a floor under his feet. What do you need me to do? He asked. Mrs. Bernal looked at his 41 ticket, then at him. Chairs, coffee, patch people to the right line. No speeches. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was probably his first useful point of the night. By 2 a.m, Lena understood what Chamber 3 had to be, even before she found the card for it. She pulled from the stack again. Systemic love fair access is not softness. It is what keeps the whole grid from eating its own load. Taped to the back in her father's writing. A station is not stable because it has sponsors. It is stable because enough people trust it to act before they are desperate. Lena sat with that while the calls kept coming. A clinic offering 6 warming spots. A bakery with residual oven heat. A mechanic with jumper cables and nowhere else to be. A parent group hand-carrying notes to buildings where the internet had died. A mosque opening prayer rooms for sleep. A laundromat girl reporting a dangerous dryer and asking if anyone nearby had baby formula. A transit worker correcting a false flood rumor before it trapped half a neighborhood on the wrong side of black ice. The board filled. The signal circulated. The city stopped behaving like isolated users and started acting, however briefly, like a living balance sheet with a conscience. Tomas with capital integrity, holding the machine together. Yumi with liquidity flow, moving witness faster than distortion. Mrs. Bernal with leverage restraint, refusing bad information and stupid promises with the discipline of a battlefield librarian. Lena with transparency truth, keeping the air unborrowed. And Hal beginning at 41 and finally learning what low starting power was actually for, not shame, just clarity. At around 3:15, when the line briefly went quiet, Lena opened the last archivist card. Who has spare current that the official map cannot see? She looked at the board and saw the answer all at once. Extension cords in bodegas, underground fridges in florist shops, unused fellowship halls, night shift nurses, apartment lobbies with stubborn superintendents, creators with battery packs, retired principals with notebooks, old transmitters everyone had called obsolete until the polished systems failed. By dawn, the chamber had done what her father clearly designed it to do. Not eliminate difference. Not simulate fairness. Not make a hard night noble. Just force the truth to circulate faster than the lie. Later, When the network wanted a cleaner account of what had happened, Hal asked Lena whether there was a format for this kind of thing. Yes, she said. He waited. It's called a public. He almost smiled. And when the city woke into that cold, bright Sunday, with the storm spent and the sidewalks full of people comparing notes they trusted only because they had heard real breath carrying them, Lena kept the box, not as a relic, as a rule set, which was why the Sunday hour stayed, not as nostalgia, not as rebellion theater, as chamber practice. 1 hour where nobody could use borrowed breath. 1 hour where signal had to circulate or rot. 1 hour where a city remembered stability was not the same thing as polish. And every week after, before they went live, Lena laid the old raffle stubs on the table anyway, not to gamify suffering, to remind everyone in the room of the first truth her father had bothered to laminate. You do not enter the week equal. You enter it responsible.
Daisu, Build the Gate. Chapter 1, The First Card. The first card felt lighter than Marcus expected. It was just cardstock, matte finish, black background, neon green lettering, a clean square of coded geometry in the center that looked unimpressive to anyone who didn't understand what it carried, but to him, it felt like infrastructure compressed into 4 inches of paper. He stood outside a barbershop in Oak Cliff just after sunrise, the city still stretching awake, traffic thin and sky washed in pale blue. In his hand were 50 of those cards. In his chest was something heavier than nerves and stronger than doubt. Alicia arrived 10 minutes later with 2 canvas totes and a clipboard tucked beneath her arm. She wore no expression of spectacle, only focus. She greeted him with a nod rather than a smile. You printed on heavier stock, it lasts longer in pockets. Landing page loads fast, that matters. He watched her, always watching how she tested things rather than reacted to them. Marcus believed in ignition. Alicia believed in proof. It was the first thing that had drawn him toward her, the way she never dismissed vision but refused to romanticize it. The shop owner opened the door and propped it wide. The smell of antiseptic and aftershave drifted into the morning air. Y'all ready? We're not asking for donations, just registration. Every resident, every business. If it helps the kids, I'll put it by the register. 15% goes directly into the community circulation fund. 20% supports the anti-bullying initiative. It's structured, measurable, transparent. The owner looked at her differently than he had looked at Marcus. Not skeptical, reassured. That's good. People tired of vague. As they left the shop, Marcus felt the first flicker of something tangible. This is how it starts. This is how it's tested. They walked side by side down the sidewalk, distributing cards into hands that accepted them casually, skeptically, curiously. Most people nodded politely. A few scanned immediately. Some asked questions. Marcus answered from instinct, from belief. Alicia answered from structure, from documentation. And somewhere between those 2 approaches, trust began forming in strangers' eyes. By noon, they had placed cards in 3 barbershops, a church vestibule, and a family-owned cafe. Sweat clung to Marcus' Cork's collar. Alicia's clipboard was now filled with handwritten notes, questions people had asked, suggestions offered, concerns raised. You write everything down. I don't build from memory. I build from patterns. He studied her profile in the sunlight, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way she held silence without filling it unnecessarily. Do you think this works? She didn't answer immediately. It works if participation becomes habit instead of hype. That's what I'm counting on. That's what you're hoping for. You stabilize me. You accelerate me. The river moved quietly below them, reflecting a skyline that seemed distant and enormous all at once. The city wasn't aware yet that something was shifting beneath it, that two people were walking its streets with coded invitations in their hands, asking for nothing more dramatic than commitment. Register, participate, align. Marcus felt something unfamiliar then, not just ambition, but responsibility, and not just toward the city, toward her, because he realized something in that moment. If this failed, it would not just damage a model, it would bruise the fragile trust forming between them. We still have Deep Ellum and Bishop Arts after one card at a time. They walk back into the city together, unaware that by sunset, over 200 scans would register quietly in a dashboard neither of them had opened yet. They weren't chasing applause, they were building alignment, and though neither of them said it out loud, something else was forming between them. Something slower than momentum and steadier than excitement. Not intensity, not fireworks, but the beginning of trust under pressure. The kind that lasts longer than ink on cardstock. Chapter 2, The Dashboard. By the time they returned to the small office space they were renting off Jefferson Boulevard, the sun had shifted from gold to amber, washing the walls in a tired kind of light. The room wasn't impressive. 2 desks, a folding table, a whiteboard still smudged from earlier projections, but it carried the hum of something beginning. Marcus dropped the remaining stack of cards onto the table and reached immediately for his laptop. Alicia didn't sit. She removed her shoes first, lined them neatly beneath the desk, then pulled her clipboard close. She preferred to review notes before reviewing outcomes. Wait, for what? For context, we measure after we reflect. He exhaled but leaned back in his chair. They reviewed the day the way athletes replay film. Who asked the hardest questions? Which neighborhoods scanned immediately? Which business owners hesitated? What objections repeated? Trust. That was the common theme. They'll trust it when they see numbers. They'll trust it when they understand governance. You really don't let emotion lead anything, do you? Emotion builds momentum. Structure sustains it. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. Okay, open it. Marcus leaned forward and clicked into the analytics dashboard. The screen loaded, then refreshed, then settled. He blinked once. 212 resident registrations, 34 business interest forms, 17 confirmed small business signups. Neither spoke immediately. Marcus felt it first, the rush rising from his chest to his throat. Not celebration, not ego, validation. Look at the pattern. What pattern? The scans cluster around 3 areas: Oak Cliff, Bishop Arts, Deep Ellum. The church vestibule drove 27. The cafe drove 19. The barbershop, 33. It's working. It's responding. There's a difference. He studied her profile again. She wasn't dampening the moment. She was grounding it. You don't get excited. I get cautious. Excitement can distort judgment. This is what I saw when I first imagined it. Participation without begging. Structure without dependency. She watched him move, restless, energized, carrying a belief that felt almost gravitational. And what happens when the next week drops to 50? It won't. You can't assume growth without friction. I'm not assuming growth. I'm assuming leadership. Leadership requires patience and courage. They were no longer just evaluating a dashboard. They were evaluating each other. Fox 4 email. Pre-interview call Thursday. Momentum. Preparation. You really won't let me have a full victory moment. I will. After we confirm retention metrics, you're unbelievable and you're impulsive. But it balances She opened another tab and began reviewing the registration flow. Click-through rates, drop-off points, confirmation emails. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, disciplined and methodical. Marcus watched her quietly. He realized something uncomfortable and honest in that moment. He trusted her more than he trusted himself. Not because he lacked confidence, but because she saw what he didn't slow down enough to notice. Alicia, she glanced up. If this grows fast, I mean really fast, are you ready for that? Are you asking about the movement or about us? Both. The office felt smaller suddenly. Outside, traffic noise drifted faintly through the window. I don't fear growth, I fear instability. And if we stay aligned, then we can scale. I won't outrun you, and I won't hold you back. The dashboard refreshed automatically. 221 registrations. The number ticked upward by 9. Neither reacted outwardly this time. They simply looked at it together. Not as dreamer and auditor, not as ignition and guardrail, but as two people beginning to understand that what they were building in the city was also being built between them. Trust, like registration, accumulates quietly, one confirmation at a time. Chapter 3, Language Matters, The Fox. 4 pre-interview call was scheduled for Thursday at 10:15 a.m., which meant by Wednesday night the office felt less like a startup and more like a war room, not chaotic, focused. DFW's first community-controlled digital network. Too abstract, it's accurate, but accuracy doesn't guarantee clarity. What would you say? I would say this. Residents and businesses register. A portion circulates back into anti-bullying and local development. Transparent oversight, measurable impact. That's less poetic. It's more trustworthy. Register, circulate, reinvest. Better. The difference between them wasn't about belief anymore. It was about translation. The dashboard had crossed 300 registrations overnight. He hadn't said it out loud, but he checked the numbers before brushing his teeth that morning. You refresh too often. You don't refresh enough. I refresh strategically. Do you ever just feel it? Feel what? That this is bigger than us. Yes, which is why we can't treat it casually. Casually, I'm not casual about this. I know. That's what worries me. He didn't understand at first. When something matters to you, you run at it full speed. You don't pace, and you pace everything. Because I've seen what happens when speed outruns structure. Instead, he nodded slowly. Then keep pacing me, and you keep pushing me. The air felt different, less professional, more human. The phone buzzed on the desk, an email notification, subject line Toyota USA Foundation, follow-up questions. Already? Open it. The message was direct. Impressive proposal. Interested in workforce development alignment. Requesting projected 5-year sustainability model and third-party oversight outline. Marcus felt the familiar surge. Proof that the door was cracking open. Alicia felt something else. Responsibility multiplying. This changes the level. It accelerates it. It complicates it. We can handle complicated. Complicated means scrutiny. Good. You like scrutiny? I like being taken seriously. Being taken seriously means being transparent in ways that aren't comfortable. I don't mind uncomfortable. That includes personal exposure. I'm not hiding anything. That's not what I meant. Okay, 5-year sustainability. We map participation growth against workforce retention improvements, show the anti-bullying impact metrics tied to graduation rates, and we emphasize community ownership. Ownership builds longevity. They work for hours without noticing time. Numbers became projections. Projections became strategy. Strategy became language. You're the reason this won't collapse. It won't collapse because we're both here. Why did you say yes to this? To the initiative? To me? Because you believe without cynicism, and that's rare. And you, why did you want me involved? Because you don't flinch. Respect, trust, interdependence, built by participation, sustained by accountability. That's it. Not just for the movement, for them. The dashboard refreshed again. 319 registrations. Growth was happening, but so was alignment, and alignment was more powerful than momentum alone. Chapter 4. Scrutiny. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of tension that doesn't announce itself loudly but hums beneath everything. The office felt smaller, the air slightly thinner, as if the walls understood that what happened in the next hour could shift the scale of everything. Marcus adjusted the camera angle for the Fox 4 pre-interview call twice before settling. He didn't like appearing uncertain. Alicia noticed anyway. You're fine. Answer directly. Don't over-explain. I don't over-explain. You absolutely do. The call connected at 10:15 sharp. The producer's face appeared on screen, composed and efficient. After brief introductions, the questions began immediately. What makes this different from previous community initiatives? It's participation-based. Every resident registers. Every business registers. A portion circulates back into anti-bullying and workforce development initiatives. It's structured reinvestment, not episodic charity. We've built transparent reporting into the system. Quarterly public dashboards, third-party oversight in progress. It's designed for accountability from the beginning. And what safeguards are in place if participation plateaus? We've modeled conservative growth curves. Even at modest participation levels, the allocation remains sustainable. We aren't dependent on spikes, we're building habit. Interesting. We'll schedule an in-studio segment next week. I'd also like to see your governance documentation, of course, in studio. That means scrutiny. You say that like it's a threat, it's a responsibility. We're stepping into visibility, and visibility amplifies mistakes. You always prepare for collapse. I prepare for sustainability. Do you ever let yourself enjoy the moment? Enjoyment is earned through endurance. You've been burned before. I've seen good ideas collapse under poor governance. I don't want that here. Neither do I. The email notification chimed again. Subject line, community concerns, transparency inquiry. A local activist group had questions about fund allocation, potential conflicts of interest, and long-term oversight. They don't even know us. They don't need to. They need clarity. This is what happens when you step forward. People assume the worst. This is what happens when you step forward publicly. You answer, and if they twist it, then we remain consistent. You don't get defensive. Defensiveness weakens credibility. And what weakens you? Instability. I won't destabilize this, I know. The dashboard refreshed quietly on the screen behind them. 372 registrations, 46 business interest forms, 23 confirmed partnerships. Neither rushed to the numbers. The real growth today wasn't on the dashboard, it was in resilience. We need to draft a public FAQ, address the transparency questions before they become rumors. You're always 2 steps ahead? No. I'm thinking about 5 years from now. 5 years from now, this will either be the model or a memory. Then we build it like it's permanent. You really believe in this. I believe in what it could become if we don't sabotage it. I'm not the sabotage, I know, but unchecked momentum can be. Outside, A siren wailed faintly in the distance. The city continued its rhythm, indifferent to their strategic calculations and emotional calibrations. We're going to get criticized, yes. We're going to be questioned, yes. And we're going to be stronger for it if we remain aligned. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't dramatic, it was a contract without paperwork, trust under scrutiny. As they released hands, the screen refreshed again. 381 registrations. Growth was steady, scrutiny was rising, and somewhere between dashboards and media calls, something deeper was forming. Not fueled by intensity, but by shared endurance. The movement was stepping into visibility, and so were they. Chapter 5, The First Wave. The momentum didn't arrive all at once. It moved like weather, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere. Marcus noticed it on a Monday morning when his phone buzzed 3 times before he even poured coffee. Another 20 scans, then 15 more, then 12. He opened the laptop before sitting down, the screen lighting the dim office with a pale glow. The map visualization had changed overnight. What had once been clusters now looked like small constellations spreading outward. Oak Cliff, Arlington, Grand Prairie, Garland. Each scan a tiny pulse. Each pulse a person deciding to participate. You checked the dashboard already, she said. It wasn't a question. Of course I did. Interesting, she murmured. What? Look at the timestamps. Before work, he said. That means people are sharing the cards at home. The idea lingered between them for a moment. Not marketing, conversation, kitchen tables, family discussions, group chats. That's organic spread. That's trust, she corrected. We should track the neighborhoods with the highest early adoption, she said. Those are potential volunteer hubs. You're already planning expansion. I'm planning stability. You always are. The office felt warmer than usual. Sunlight sliding through the windows and catching the edge of the whiteboard where their phrases still stood. Register, circulate, reinvest. Marcus stood and added a new line beneath it. Community built, community owned. That works, she said. High praise. You're learning. You know something? What? You're starting to sound optimistic. I'm starting to see patterns. Patterns mean it's working. Patterns mean it's repeatable. The phone rang. A local cafe owner. I just registered. Do you guys have window stickers? Marcus. Not yet, owner VO. Well, if we're part of this thing, people should know. That's the first time someone asked to signal membership. Visibility increases adoption. You're thinking window decals and storefront signage. You're getting ambitious. I'm responding to demand. You like this? He said quietly. I like progress and the mission. That too. The dashboard refreshed again. 504 registrations. That jump happened in the last hour. Look at the source. A church youth group had posted the QR code link in their online newsletter. Dozens of families had registered within minutes. This is the first wave. It's the first signal you never let yourself celebrate. I celebrate by preparing. That might be the most Alicia sentence ever spoken. We should visit that church today. Yes. Why? Because early supporters shape culture. That's smart. They gathered the remaining stack of cards and headed toward the door. Before leaving, Marcus glanced once more at the dashboard. The number had climbed again. 516. He felt something shift inside him. Not excitement this time, but responsibility expanding. Outside, the city looked the same as it had yesterday. Traffic flowed, people moved through their routines, storefronts opened their doors, but beneath the ordinary rhythm, a quiet network was forming. Not controlled by institutions, not directed by advertising, built by participation. This is the phase where attention increases and scrutiny follows. Yes, are you ready for that? She met his gaze with the same steady calm she always carried. We're ready, he nodded, not because he was certain, but because she was beside him. And together they walked back into the city, toward the church, toward the next set of conversations, toward a future that was beginning to look less like an idea and more like a structure, one registration at a time. And though neither of them said it out loud, they both felt it. This was no longer just a project, it was becoming a movement. And movements, once they begin, rarely stay small for long. Chapter 6. The Signal. The church sat on a quiet corner where two residential streets met, the kind of place most people passed without noticing unless they had reason to stop. A modest brick building, white doors, a small patch of grass that had seen decades of Sunday footsteps. Marcus, that's where the wave started. Alicia, not a wave, a signal. Marcus, you're going to keep correcting that, aren't you? Alicia, yes. Teen, that's the QR thing. Marcus, you registered? Teen, yeah, our youth pastor sent it out. Pastor, I figured you two might come by. Marcus, why's that? Pastor, because the link got shared faster than I expected. Pastor, we put them out Sunday morning. Parents asked questions. Most of them liked the anti-bullying initiative part. Alicia, that's where 20% of the circulation fund goes. We're building mentorship and support programs. Pastor, people respond when they see the structure behind the intention. Narrator, Marcus glanced at Alicia. Structure, her word again. Narrator, they spent nearly an hour there answering questions, explaining the participation model, and listening to concerns. A few parents asked about privacy. A business owner asked about reporting transparency. Alicia answered each one with careful clarity. Narrator, Marcus noticed something interesting. When she spoke, people leaned closer, not because she was louder, because she was precise. Narrator, by the time they left the church, another 20 registrations had appeared on the dashboard. Marcus, it's spreading. Alicia, it's connecting. Marcus, you're determined not to let me romanticize this. Alicia, I'm determined to keep it grounded. Marcus, you know what's strange. Alicia, what? Marcus, this doesn't feel like marketing. Alicia, it isn't. Marcus, it feels like something else. Alicia, community architecture. Narrator, when they returned to the office, a small envelope sat beneath the door. Marcus picked it up. No return address. Narrator, inside was a handwritten note. Saw the cards at the cafe. Registered my family. My son has been bullied for years. Thank you for trying something different. Sazikatsinti, Samsi, Ingasi, Azarati, Inamarnisi, Anasi, I had a thirst. Marcus read it twice before setting it on the desk. Neither of them spoke immediately. The room felt quieter than before. Marcus, that's why this matters. Alicia, yes. Narrator, the dashboard refreshed. 602 registrations. Marcus, that's more than numbers now. Alicia, it always was. Marcus, you carry this heavier than I do. Alicia, because I know what the problem looks like up close. Narrator, bullying wasn't an abstract concept for her. It was personal. Narrator, the silence.
When the dashboards lie, paper starts sounding holy.
2. The Gospel of the Cheapest Hour, Daily Pulse, 7:11 a.m. Sovereignty, prices are becoming a behavioral interface. Flow, food, signal, and patience are being rerouted by prompts. Systemic love, the people with the least slack will be asked to optimize first. Shadow, help is beginning to sound like a discount. Archivist, ask what gets renamed convenience when it is really compliance. The alert arrived while the train was slowing into West Fulton, just as the car gave one long metallic groan, and everybody in it adjusted their balance by instinct. Best savings window for groceries. 8:40, 9:05 p.m. suggested breakfast swap. Eggs volatile. Choose oats. The blue notification sat in my hand with the bright patience of something that assumed it was welcome. I looked at it for 1 second longer than the sentence deserved, then I locked the screen and kept holding the phone anyway, as if the insult might still be warm. That was what these prompts were, finally. Not information. Not advice. Small managerial corrections delivered directly into the pocket. The machine saw the shape of your week, shaved off whatever looked expensive, and handed the result back to you as prudence. Across the aisle, a woman in scrubs was asleep against the window with her mouth slightly open. A man in a navy polo scrolled through 3 news apps in the fast, irritated rhythm of someone trying to catch reality before it got rewritten. 2 teenagers shared one set of earbuds and laughed at something that had clearly not asked their permission before becoming funny. Outside, the city slid by in early light, loading docks, church steps, a mural half hidden behind scaffolding, the long blank wall of a warehouse catching sun like a bruise.
The train speaker crackled. Expect minor delays due to heat-related signal adjustments. It was March.
Nobody reacted. That was the part I was having trouble getting used to. Not the absurdity itself, but the speed with which people learned to absorb it as routine. Wrong season heat, grocery timing, hydration savings windows, air quality advisories delivered in the tone of lifestyle and convenience. The city had developed a customer service dialect polished enough to describe almost anything without ever sounding ashamed. The train crossed the river and the rails beneath us gave a low harmonic shudder, a bass note, brief enough to deny if you wanted to, and old enough to feel personal if you didn't. I watched a child 2 seats down pause in the middle of pulling stickers off a notebook and look at the floor as if she had heard someone humming under the car. Then the note was gone. By the time we pulled into Grand, the alert had updated itself. Projected savings if delayed, $4.12, enough money to convince a well-paid executive that optimization was compassionate, not enough money to change the architecture of anybody's life, just enough to ask a tired person to become slightly less human about breakfast. I got off at Grand and walked the 4 blocks to WNDR with the phone still in my hand. The station occupied the 2nd and 3rd floors of an old insurance building renovated just enough to suggest resilience and not enough to deserve the word. The lobby always smelled faintly of burnt dust and old refrigerant, as if a machine in the walls had been overachieving on a fixed budget since 1998. Someone had mounted a vertical brand screen near the elevators. It cycled through the station's new messaging pillars in calm sans serif authority. Community clarity. Calm, the word, calm, stayed on screen the longest. Upstairs, the newsroom was already making its weekday noises. Printer cough, chair wheels, the muttered profanity of someone in traffic trying to rescue a mangled cut. Coffee grinding like it resented being asked to participate in civic life before 8. The weather desk TV on mute. 2 producers in a low argument over whether the city had upgraded the school closure API or merely changed the logo on the same old failure. I dropped my bag beside my desk and booted up the editing bay. A calendar invite was pinned to the top of my screen before anything else had loaded. Mandatory all hands. Studio B, 8:30 a.m. Subject, Local Acceleration Initiative. Nothing good in media had ever come wrapped in the phrase, acceleration initiative. The best case was that management wanted everybody to work faster using a new stack none of us had asked for. The worst case was that they had found a new way to make replacement sound like innovation.
I put on headphones and pulled up the morning weather cut that had landed overnight from the network desk. The read was clean, too clean. No paper noise, no room tone, no chair shift, no micro pause where a human being checked the next line and thought briefly about whether they still believed in their own profession. Localized variability expected across the metro through evening, the voice said. Residents are encouraged to remain flexible as conditions evolve.
I soloed the track and listened again, this time to the space around the words. There wasn't any. No breath friction, no noise floor, no incidental proof that a body had occupied the room between the mic and the sentence. Either the read had been processed to death, or it had never been alive to begin with. At WNDR, those had recently stopped being opposite possibilities.
I was trimming the back half of the bulletin when Thomas Ward stopped beside my desk with a screwdriver tucked into the breast pocket of his work shirt, and the permanent squint of a man who spent too much time keeping old systems alive after budgets had moved on. "You hear the overnight?" he asked. "I'm hearing it now." He tilted his head toward my headphones. "Does it sound occupied to you?" "No. Thought so." Tomas handled station engineering 3 days a week and transit signal maintenance the other 2. He distrusted innovation mostly because he had been the one expected to keep yesterday's innovation alive after the ribbon-cutting money wandered off. "What happened overnight?" I asked. 3 local bulletins got routed through the new stack.
At 8:29, the newsroom began emptying toward the glass-walled studio. People carried coffee, notebooks, guarded expressions. Nobody said much. Management meetings rarely improved through commentary in advance.
Hal Brenner was already inside waiting for us, standing in front of the wall monitor with both hands folded at his waist, as if he were either about to announce a strategic partnership or officiate a death. "Morning, everyone," he said. "We'll keep this tight."
The monitor behind him showed a title card. Sable Local Real-Time Civic Signal Synthesis.
Hal smiled the way people smile when they believe skepticism is simply a prelude to gratitude. "As you know," he said, "audience expectations have changed. Utility matters, responsiveness matters, speed matters. The old distinctions between newsroom, service desk, and real-time public guidance are collapsing. WNDR has an opportunity to lead the next phase of local trust. Sable Local is a synthetic assistance layer built specifically for dynamic city environments. It ingests weather feeds, school notices, public alerts, transit status, partner data, relevant social signals, and station assets, then generates tailored local bulletins in seconds. Weather feeds, public alerts, transit status, traffic conditions, market signals, social video, UGC, partner content, licensed talent voices. This is not replacing anyone. It's an augmentation layer. It frees staff to focus on what humans do best: editorial framing, contextual reporting, and community connection. Whisper. Funny how every tool designed to free us ends up itemizing our necessity. Let me show you a live use case. A compiled Sable output appears. "Good morning, Caldwell. It may feel like summer today, but don't let it fool you. Localized heat impacts are expected through late afternoon, especially in transit-dense corridors. Residents are encouraged to remain flexible, stay hydrated, and check on sensitive neighbors. For the best value on select hydration supplies, users may wish to monitor afternoon retail windows."
3 things were wrong with the paragraph immediately. The first was tonal. It sounded local in the way a chain restaurant sounds rustic. The second was moral. It had laundered a pricing insult into service journalism. The third was sonic, and therefore to me, the worst. Even as silent text, I could hear the cadence it expected to wear. Warm, capable, moderate smile, branded intimacy.
"Can it do alternate tones?" somebody asked. "Of course," Hal said. Tone tabs appear: calm authority, neighborly practical, urgent but reassuring, parent safe, younger mobile. Rewritten output: "Heads up, Caldwell. It's another strange weather day. Heat will build fast across the city, so now is a good time to refill water and avoid long waits later if you can. Some stores may offer better hydration pricing this afternoon. Transit riders should expect minor slowdowns as the system adjusts."
My phone buzzed again in my hand. Projected savings available tonight if shopping delayed. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. The whole room was already made of the same sentence. The strength here is consistency. We can maintain tone, utility, and trust even under volume, Hal said. That was when the reversal began, though I didn't name it yet. Up to that point, Sable could still be mistaken for another management delusion, another software layer imposed on people who would eventually have to clean up after it. Irritating, familiar, potentially survivable. Then Hal opened the voice module.
"Because local presence matters," he said. "Sable can also deploy licensed familiarity packages for continuity reads.
Some were generic. Local female warm, local male steady, younger neutral, Spanish practical. Below those sat names, real names, past and present hosts, freelancers, weekend anchors, contractors who had signed too many things during lean months. My own name wasn't there yet, though I had an immediate and physical hatred for the empty space where it might one day fit.
Good morning, Caldwell. Conditions remain manageable across most of the region. Someone behind me swore, quietly but with conviction. The imitation was almost perfect, the upward lift before the city name, the softened second consonant, the slightly warmer air on the word morning. If you were driving, packing lunches, brushing your teeth, half listening while tying a child's shoe, it would pass. That was the market case. Broadcast not as attention, but as atmospheric trust. It preserves listener familiarity, Hal said.
Perfect timing, he said. Everyone, this is Yumi Reyes. Some of you know her work. We're exploring a local partnership layer for selective civic utility integration.
We've licensed some of your recent neighborhood footage to enrich the local traffic and weather package. Enrich, she repeated. Does it keep my voice? Depending on the use case, Sable can isolate ambient scene information and apply station-consistent narration for clarity.
On preview, the original audio dropped away. In its place came a smooth station voice. Minor delays are expected in select corridors as commuters adapt to unseasonal temperatures. Residents are advised to allow extra time and remain flexible throughout the afternoon.
In the original clip, two people had been fighting with a driver over whether an ambulance had actually come. Somebody's grandmother had been getting dragged toward shade in a lawn chair while a volunteer shouted for water off frame. The clip had run on neighborhood feeds for about an hour before cleaner versions of the day outcompeted it. It preserves local visual texture while removing ambient noise that may confuse the message, Hal said.
There were two people fighting in that clip.
That was the moment the whole demo reorganized in my head. Sable was not helping the newsroom. It was not merely thinning it. It was learning how to perform our civic function while removing the human residue that made it disobedient, difficult, or slow. It did not want reporting. Reporting had labor costs, legal nerves, local memory, and people who occasionally refused to smooth a sentence because smoothing it would make it false. What Sable wanted was local clarity on command, locality without local labor, familiarity without presence, urgency without witnesses, a city converted into inputs and returned to itself in a more manageable voice. It was not assisting the newsroom, it was rehearsing life without it. I looked around the room. Other people had felt it too, not all at once and not in the same language, but in the slight collective stillness that settles over a workplace when its future has just been shown to it in demo mode. Hal, either bravely or stupidly, kept going.
Let's run one more scenario. He clicked into a multi-input stack. Weather anomaly, school schedule changes, traffic incident near the river, a city heat advisory, commodity uptick graphics, 3 neighborhood clips, and a creator-facing relay prompt from a municipal comms partner. The progress ring spun faster this time. The output pane bloomed. One version for radio red, one for push alert, one for a creator relay caption, one for in-car voice, one for school-safe family language, one for a late-night automated bulletin. Tone selected automatically, calm authority. The synthetic voice activated.
Heat-related signal delays, haze advisory language, school caution wording, reduced transit capacity, an incident near the river, reminders to remain calm, reminders to remain flexible, reminders to avoid unnecessary strain.
3. The sign against the algorithm. Daily Pulse, 8:26 a.m. Sovereignty. Witness is being penalized for arriving unstyled. Flow. Attention is moving toward softness and away from need. Systemic love. Public truth is being asked to compete with prettier lies. Shadow. The feed does not hate panic. It hates unmonetized panic. Archivist. Ask what gets throttled when it shows too much of the room. By 8:41, the line outside the cooling center had already bent past the chain link fence and into the sliver of shade cast by a mural nobody could afford to restore. I stood across the street with my camera up and the sun hitting the back of my neck like an insult. The line looked the way lines always look when a city has made ordinary survival just complicated enough to require choreography. A woman in pink scrubs fanned her son with a clinic brochure. An old man sat on a folding walker with an oxygen rig at his feet and a paper number tucked into the band of his cap. 2 teenagers in school uniform shared 1 bottle of water and took turns pretending they weren't worried. Near the front door, the city had placed a sandwich board. Heat support available. Scan for live wait times. The QR code was printed so small it looked embarrassed. I filmed the line. Then the volunteer table. Then the shimmer above the parking lot. Then the bus shelter where 3 people had already given up and sat on the concrete because the bench itself had turned hostile. I filmed the heat the only way you really can, indirectly, through all the bad decisions it forces a city to reveal. A notification slid across my screen while I was still recording. High brightness lifestyle content performing well in your area. I laughed once, out loud. That was the feed in 1 sentence. Elderly people waiting for cooling support before 9 in the morning, and somewhere in a server room, a little graph was leaning towards sorbet colors and serum routines. I posted the clip anyway. No music, no filter, no voiceover. I left the ambient sound in. Bus brakes, coughing, a volunteer saying they were out of fans. Somebody near the back asking whether the building had backup cooling if the power cut out. Caption: Cooling center on 9th already backed up before 9 a.m. This is March. For 3 minutes the numbers behaved like numbers. Then, they started lying. Views climbed, slowed, stalled. Comments came in late and out of order. Shares stopped carrying the way they should. The post didn't die exactly. It got managed. There's a difference. Anyone who works online long enough learns to feel it in their teeth. Some posts collapse because nobody cares. Some posts get moved quietly into a padded room where attention goes to become less useful. The comments got stupid, on schedule. Old footage. Can you verify date? Looks AI TBH. This could be anywhere. That last one always makes me want to throw my phone into the river. This could be anywhere, is how people tell themselves they still live somewhere exceptions happen, not patterns. I tried a second post. Still image this time. Tight crop on the paper number tucked into the old man's cap, oxygen rig visible below the frame line. Caption: No, the footage is not old. The weather is. That one did a little better. Sarcasm helps. People like truth when it arrives wearing a face. They can repost without feeling obligated to leave the couch. But the original clip was done. I could feel it. Soft buried. Politely deprioritized. The digital equivalent of being told your concern was valid and would be answered in the order received. I opened the city account. Sure enough, 4 minutes earlier, they had posted a heat infographic in pale blue and government coral. Stay. Heat aware. Hydrate early. Check on sensitive neighbors, comments off. Of course, that was the thing that actually made me angry. Not the throttling by itself, the sequencing. The line was real, the heat was real, the waiting was real. The old man with the oxygen rig was real. But the clean infographic got escorted past the body of the event and introduced as the useful version. I switched to live. Bad angle. Harsh light. My face in the corner, which I hate. The line behind me. No intro, because the weather did not need one. I'm outside 9th, I said. Cooling center already backed up. If you've got somebody elderly or medically fragile, don't assume you can just roll in at opening and be fine. A few hundred people joined. Then fewer. Then fewer. Still enough to matter, not enough to trust. Questions came fast at first. How long is the wait? Any shade? Are they taking walk-ins? Is there water? Anybody know if the West Side Center is better? Then the static question started. Pan left. Can you verify date? What city is this? This looks weird. Source? Source. I turned the camera and gave them the mural, the bus stop, the laundromat sign across the avenue, the cracked curb by the storm drain, the whole stupid architecture of local proof. It didn't help. Half the internet now behaves like a jury pool raised by magicians. Everybody wants authenticity. Nobody wants to accept that authenticity usually arrives sweaty, overexposed, and with bad sound. One of the volunteers came over and asked if I could please not film faces too closely. Totally, I said, and lowered the phone. He looked exhausted enough that I didn't ask whether the city had sent enough staff, enough water, enough instructions, or enough electrical redundancy. The answer was in his shoulders. The live dropped below 100 viewers. I ended it and opened the analytics again because self-harm comes in dashboard form now. The feed had already moved on. A matcha place downtown was posting heat-proof lunch ideas. A fitness creator had a carousel about hydration stacking. Someone else had a pretty reel of sunlight falling across apartment floors captioned "Summer in March" with a poll sticker. Soft, pretty posts outperform everything true. At a certain point, it stops being bitterness and starts becoming infrastructure. At the corner, a transit kiosk offered route alternatives for comfort. A grocery app billboard promised savings for flexible shoppers. One Morrow ad, the same cool blue as the alert on half the city's phones, said, "Save more by timing your shopping." A second screen on the next block was selling hydration by window. It would have been funny if it hadn't been structural. The train passed overhead again while I waited to cross Morrow, and the rails gave off that same low note. Bass heavy, old. Just long enough to make the air feel briefly occupied by something besides weather. People around me didn't react. One little girl did. She looked up at the tracks, and then at her mother, who was too busy arguing with a grocery substitution app to notice. I cut down Marrow because when the internet gets dishonest, I go looking for rooms with chairs. That's only half a joke. The Switchyard had become one of the only places in the neighborhood where you could walk in with a bad mood and not immediately get turned into a customer journey about it. Rhea sold books and stationery and records and did turntable repairs in a narrow storefront that smelled like paper, sleeve dust, and whatever truth happened to be in the room that day. People older than me called it retro when they wanted to imply charm. People my age called it analog when they wanted to sound reverent about anything that still required hands. I turned the corner and saw the sign in the window before I saw her. Cold water if you ask. No app necessary. That stopped me. Not because it was cute. I'm resistant to cute on principle before noon. It stopped me because it was correct. The city had spent all morning trying to route need through the proper interfaces. Scan here, compare there, check the feed, monitor pricing, optimize your timing, accept alternatives. And here, in black marker taped to glass, was a better public sentence than anything I had seen on my phone all day. Cold water if you ask. No app necessary. It wasn't content. It wasn't branding. It wasn't trying to perform care at scale. It was just language, clean enough to act on. A man in a work vest paused to read it while I stood there. He didn't come in. He just looked at it for a second, nodded like something private had been confirmed, and kept walking. That was when the sign changed categories in my head. Until that second, the Switchyard had lived in one mental folder for me. Useful place, good pens, decent people, occasional refuge from the kind of internet that makes you want to throw your own phone into traffic. I liked it, I trusted it, but I was still reading it as a store with principles. The sign made me see the other version. Front-facing glass, public sightline, paper in bulk, markers that worked. A back room, a front room, a woman behind the counter who understood language as infrastructure, a customer base made of exactly the sort of people institutions forget until weather turns mean. That wasn't quaint, that was a node. I thought about the line outside the cooling center. I thought about the comments asking for source. I thought about the city account dropping its infographic like a towel over something embarrassing. I thought about every platform in my life insisting public reality be translated into the right shape before it would grant it oxygen. Then I looked at the sign again. No app necessary. It wasn't just kind. It was anti-protocol. A small correction, yes, but also a rejection of the whole logic that had started creeping over the city. If a need could be timed, priced, routed, softened, delayed, upgraded, or replaced with an aesthetically nicer version of itself, then maybe it didn't count as urgent until the right system said so. The Switchyard was not saying that, it was saying ask. The thing about asking is that it requires another person to still be there when the question arrives. I pulled my phone back out and pointed it at the sign. Then, I lowered it again, without taking the shot. That surprised me. Normally, everything goes through frame first. That's how you survive online without getting eaten by your own witness. But the sign didn't need to be captured to function. It was already doing its job, maybe better because it hadn't yet become image. A woman with a stroller stopped, read the sign, and went in. A delivery rider slowed down, read it, and kept moving with the relieved look of someone filing away coordinates for later. A school kid read it from across the street and said something to a friend that made both of them turn and look again.
Prologue. When Cherry found the 6 before the cards, before the boxes, before the chamber learned to speak back, Anonymous Cherry already lived by discipline, not the loud kind, not the kind that announces itself in public and dies in private. The time chamber lifestyle began as a room, a routine, and a refusal. A room with dim walls and a bare floor. A routine built from breath, stillness, tea, movement, writing, action. A refusal to let the world decide the pace of the spirit. Cherry had built the chamber slowly, like someone hiding a temple inside an ordinary life. There was no throne in it, no neon sign, no mirror for vanity, no altar crowded with things that looked powerful but did nothing. There was only a mat, a journal, a kettle, a low table, a clock turned away from the body, and enough silence to hear a heartbeat choose itself. Outside that room, time acted like an enemy. Inside it, time could be bent. That was the whole philosophy. 1 hour inside the chamber had to become more real than 6 hours outside it. A single deliberate act had to outweigh a day of reaction. Breath had to come before opinion. Posture before panic. Movement before performance. Truth before mood. Cherry called it a lifestyle because it could not stay in the room. If it stayed in the room, it was decoration. The chamber had to follow into speech, money, hunger, conflict, sleep, love, and work. Otherwise, it was just another costume worn by people too afraid to change. So Cherry trained. Pulse first, breath second, body third, mind fourth, action last. On certain mornings, Cherry practiced the hidden coil, the serpent method of gathering force without spilling it. Feet rooted, jaw loose, spine rolling like a quiet wave. Breath descending from forehead to throat, from throat to heart, from heart to belly. The point was not to become dramatic. The point was to stop leaking. Anonymous snake chi, Cherry wrote once in the journal, is not about striking. It is about becoming impossible to scatter. That sentence stayed, but even the chamber, in all its severity, had a missing wall. Cherry could train in silence, but sometimes silence did not answer. Cherry could hold stillness, but stillness did not always explain what the day was asking for. Some mornings the body was ready, the tea was hot, the notebook open, the breath low, and yet the path ahead still felt blurred, like a window breathing fog from both sides. That was the state Cherry was in the day the 6 boxes appeared. It was late afternoon, rain beginning without warning, the kind that darkens the street before anyone admits the weather has changed. Cherry had stepped into a cramped second-hand shop to avoid getting soaked. The place smelled like dust, cedar, paper, and old cloth, like forgotten things that had survived because nobody had decided what to do with them. There were shelves leaning under the weight of cookbooks, cracked hardcovers, old astrology manuals, out-of-season planners, candle jars, half-burned incense, and photographs of strangers whose names had come loose from memory. Cherry wasn't looking for anything sacred. Just shelter, maybe tea, maybe a small blank notebook if the price was right. A few minutes in, Cherry turned a corner too sharply, caught a boot against a low wooden crate tucked beneath a display table, and stumbled. The crate tipped. Its contents slid out across the floor in a dark, soft scatter. Cherry crouched instinctively to gather them, and that was when the room changed. The first box was deep blue-black, almost night-colored, and on it a woman with dark hair touched her forehead as though opening a hidden eye. Light glowed at the brow. Light glowed again at the chest. Above and below her were words that seemed less like a title than an announcement. World Shaman's Oracle. Cherry held it a second too long. The second box carried a wolf's face emerging from shadow and leaves, eyes fixed, patient, almost too alive for cardboard. Spirit animals. Journey into the wild. The third was pale minimal, almost innocent if not for the way it stared back with perfect bluntness. What's the tea? A teapot. A cup, a question that sounded simple and dangerous at the same time. Beneath the others were 3 smaller decks, each with a different pressure in the hand. The black-green one with the translucent winged figure, angel number oracle cards. The purple one with the glowing edge of a planet and tiny figures beneath an impossible sky, messages from the universe oracle cards. And the last dark and star-stormed, a hooded figure seated beneath cosmic fire, messages of cosmic oracle cards. Cherry knelt there in the thin stripe of shop light, rain tapping the window, boxes spread over the floor like 6 doors no one had meant to open at once. They did not feel random. That was the first unsettling thing. The second was that each box seemed to answer a lack Cherry had never fully named. World shamans felt like witness, old medicine, older than trend, older than self-improvement, older than the need to be seen changing. Spirit animals felt like body memory, instinct tracking, muscle timing, movement without self-betrayal. What's the T felt like the blade, no smoke, no halo, just the hot truth poured plain enough to burn. Angel number felt like rhythm, pattern, recurrence, the mathematics of being nudged by something beyond mood. Messages from the universe felt like reassurance without softness, like being corrected by a sky that loved precision. Messages of cosmic felt like scale, the reminder that the self was both tiny and capable of carrying something vast. Cherry stacked them carefully. An elderly cashier at the front looked up over a pair of thin glasses and gave a slow smile that didn't quite reach sentimentality. Funny, she said. Those sat there for months. Nobody touched them. Cherry glanced down at the boxes in both hands. They were under the table, Cherry said. The cashier shrugged as if that changed nothing. Still found you. Cherry bought all 6. By the time Cherry got home, the rain had deepened into evening. The apartment was quiet. The chamber door stood half open down the hall, its darkness waiting in the same way it always waited, without pressure, without persuasion, like a place that would never chase, but would always receive. Cherry carried the boxes in one at a time, set the kettle on, wiped the low table clean, turned the clock fully toward the wall, then stood in the center of the room and looked at the chamber as if seeing its unfinished blueprint for the first time. The time chamber lifestyle had always been about compression, less distraction, more presence, less drift, more choice. But now Cherry understood that the chamber could become more than a forge. It could become a map. Cherry placed World Shaman's oracle directly ahead of the mat where the eyes naturally fell. That would be the witness position, the medicine seat, the place of elder sight. Spirit animals went to the left, near heart level. That would be the instinct gate, the body law, the moving intelligence. What's the T went to the right. Truth belonged beside action, not above it. Angel number was set on the shelf just above eye level, where it could look down into the room like a pattern waiting to be noticed. Messages from the universe was placed near the foot of the mat, at the horizon line of the body, where guidance could arrive like a letter placed beneath a door. Messages of cosmic was set behind the mat, at Cherry's back, where the unseen and the immense could keep their pressure without turning the whole ritual into spectacle. Then Cherry stepped back. For a moment nothing happened, just tea warming, rain falling, the tiny sounds of a home being itself. Then the room changed the way a room changes when purpose enters it. Not brighter, not haunted, organized. Cherry felt it in the sternum first, a click like a lock deciding to trust a key. The chamber was no longer only a place to strip away noise. It had become a 6-walled method of receiving, embodying, discerning, timing, listening, and enduring. The lifestyle had found its mythology. The training had found its witnesses. Cherry sat cross-legged on the mat and opened the journal. On a fresh page, Cherry wrote, Time chamber, expanded form shaman for root, animal for motion, T for truth, number for timing, universe for message, cosmic for scale. Cherry stared at the lines, then added one more beneath them. The chamber is no longer a room. It is a council. The tea was ready. Cherry poured it into a plain cup and let the steam rise between body and boxes. In the old days, that would have been the start. Tea, breath, training, task. Now there was a threshold to cross first. Cherry touched the pulse at the wrist. Slow, present, not calm exactly, more like gathered. Then Cherry spoke aloud to the room for the first time in weeks. I built this chamber to protect my time, Cherry said softly. Now let it teach me what time is for. Something in that sentence landed. Not in the air, in the body. Cherry closed the eyes and felt the old serpent practice stir beneath the ribs, not striking, not threatening, only coiling deeper, as if recognizing that the chamber finally had the right architecture to hold it. The hidden force no longer had to live in a blank room. It had walls now, direction now, sky now. When Cherry opened the eyes again, the 6 boxes seemed less like objects and more like sealed chapters waiting to be entered, not read. Entered. That night no cards were pulled. That was the first discipline of the new era. Cherry did not rush the meeting just because the door had opened. Instead, Cherry sat in the center of the 6 and listened to the rain until it sounded like pages turning somewhere inside the walls. Then Cherry drank the tea, finished the breath work, and wrote a final line before closing the journal. Tomorrow, the chamber begins speaking. Outside, the city kept wasting its hours. Inside, anonymous Cherry had found the books that would turn the time chamber lifestyle into a living saga. Chapter 1. The rule of first light. Cherry woke before the alarm, before the sky had chosen a color, before the city remembered its own noise. For a few seconds there was only the dark ceiling, the slow rise of breath, and the feeling that something had already arrived and was waiting patiently in the next room. Then Cherry remembered the 6 boxes. The chamber. The sentence written at the bottom of the page the night before. Tomorrow, the chamber begins speaking. Cherry sat up. No phone. No checking the hour for permission. No drifting into other people's weather before touching the day. That had always been one of the chamber laws. Protect the first light. Even when the light had not yet appeared. Cherry washed hands in cold water, tied back loose hair, filled the kettle, and moved barefoot through the apartment with the care of someone entering a place that could hear intention before sound. Outside, the rain had passed. The windows held that strange after-dark clarity that comes when the world has been rinsed but not forgiven. The chamber door was still half open. Inside, the room waited exactly as Cherry had left it. Mat centered, low table clean, journal closed, clock turned to the wall. The 6 decks placed like stations in a private cosmology. World shamans ahead, spirit animals to the left. What's the T to the right? Angel number above. Messages from the universe at the horizon of the mat. Messages of cosmic behind, like a pressure too large to fit in front. Cherry stepped into the center and stopped. There it was again, that click in the sternum, quiet but unmistakable, as if the body itself recognized an architecture the mind had only started to understand. Before the chamber had become a council, it had been a forge. Now it was both. Cherry knelt at the low table, opened the journal to a fresh page, and wrote the date without checking whether it mattered to anyone else. Beneath it, slowly, carefully, Cherry wrote the laws of the expanded chamber. Not many. Only what could survive repetition. No second pulls. No asking what I already know. No interpretation that flatters cowardice. No leaving the chamber without one real act. No using spirit to avoid life. Cherry stopped there. That was enough. Too many laws became theater. Too few became mood. The kettle clicked softly in the next room. Cherry let it wait. This first part had to happen without comfort in the hand. Standing again, Cherry placed 2 fingers at the wrist. The pulse was steady, but not gentle. It carried anticipation the way a bow carries an arrow before the release, drawn, quiet, refusing waste. Cherry closed the eyes. Inhale to the brow. Exhale to the throat. Inhale to the chest. Exhale to the belly. Again. The old serpent method uncoiled in the body almost immediately, not dramatic, not mystical, simply precise. The breath descended. The jaw loosened. The spine felt less like a column and more like a listening instrument. By the 7th breath, Cherry could feel the room settle around the body, rather than the body straining to occupy the room. Only then did Cherry sit on the mat and reach for the first deck. World Shaman's oracle felt heavier than cardboard should feel, not physically, in principle. Cherry held the box with both hands for a moment before opening it, as if greeting a person too old to rush. The cards slid free with a soft, clean sound. The guidebook lay beneath them like a second pulse. Cherry did not open the booklet first. This morning was not for study. It was for meeting. The cards moved slowly in Cherry's hands, not shuffled for randomness exactly, but turned, mixed, breathed into until they stopped feeling like arranged objects and started feeling like a language looking for where to land. Then one card loosened at the edge and slipped down into Cherry's lap face up. Cherry looked, an elder, not young, not ornamental, not softened for comfort. A face marked by weather and ceremony. A gaze that did not invite belief so much as demand honesty. Around the figure were signs of land and element, smoke or mist, the edge of gold, a shape that could have been flame or dawn, depending on who was looking. Cherry did not need the title first. The message hit before the name could. Remember who stands behind you when you enter sacred work. The room changed, not visually, in posture. Cherry's back straightened as if a line of unseen hands had settled there, not pushing, simply present. Suddenly, the chamber felt less like a private invention and more like a room being joined by others. The women in Cherry's family, who had held everything together without the courtesy of applause. The dead who had survived in practical ways, not poetic ones. The unnamed ones in every bloodline and neighborhood who had built small sanctuaries out of kitchens, stoops, notebooks, prayer, recipes, work, silence, warning, and refusal. Cherry lowered the forehead to the mat, not in worship, in acknowledgement. I am not self-made, Cherry said into the woven fibers. The words sounded plain, good. Plain words held better. When Cherry sat back up, the chamber no longer felt empty. It felt witnessed. That was enough for the first deck. Cherry placed the shaman card at the front edge of the mat and reached left. Spirit animals. The wolf on the box had looked patient in the shop. Here, in the dim early light of the chamber, patience felt like a harder thing, not the absence of urgency, but its mastery. Cherry opened the deck and shuffled standing this time. That felt right. Movement belonged to this one. The first card turned in Cherry's hand before it fully cleared the deck. Fur. Eyes, a body shaped for endurance rather than spectacle, not charging, not fleeing, tracking. Cherry exhaled once through the nose. Of course, the message came with the image, lean and exact. Stop circling your own life. Track it. Cherry had the strange and immediate feeling of being found out. For months, the chamber had protected Cherry from distraction. Yes, but protection had a shadow side. Protection could harden into perimeter. Perimeter could become habit. Habit could become a beautiful form of delay. The animal card did not accuse. It narrowed. Track the actual trail. Follow what is living. Stop patrolling the same internal forest as if movement itself were proof of progress. Cherry set the animal card beside the shaman card, then stood and crossed the room in 7 slow steps. Heel, ball, toe, breathe, pause. Again, each step felt louder than it sounded. The body, under the gaze of the wolf, became honest in a way mirrors never accomplished. There was no room for performance here. Either a step landed cleanly or it didn't. Either the body knew where it was going or it was pretending to know. By the 7th step, Cherry could feel the old leak clearly. Too much inward circling. Too much preparation mistaken for arrival. Cherry turned back to the mat and reached right. The pale box of What's the Tea looked almost harmless between the darker decks. Cherry knew better already. The cards were lighter, quicker in the hands, almost eager. The first one that came up had only a few words on it, and Cherry felt the heat in the chest before fully reading them. Not because the card was cruel, because it was accurate. It said, in its own sharp little way, what the chamber had been building toward for months. You've been hiding behind preparation. Cherry stared. The sentence did not physically exist on the card in that exact form, but it existed in the meaning so cleanly, it may as well have been printed there. Not unprepared, not lazy, not unserious, hiding behind preparation, a more respectable form of fear. Cherry almost laughed, which would have been easier than letting the truth land. Instead, Cherry let it land. The chamber lifestyle had made Cherry stronger, yes, more deliberate, less available to nonsense, more able to hear the body under the static. But strength had become a place to stay. Discipline had become a place to postpone exposure. The chamber had not failed. It had simply matured to the point where it could no longer be used as a shelter from beginning. Cherry placed the T card down with more care than the first two. The chamber was speaking now, and it was not speaking for comfort. Good. Comfort had never been the point. Cherry looked up toward the shelf and reached for the black-green box. Angel number oracle cards. These shuffled differently, with a crispness that made Cherry think of doors and thresholds and elevator numbers glowing in dark hallways. When the card came, the repeating digits struck before meaning did. Order, echo, recurrence, pattern speaking through multiplication. Cherry felt a chill move lightly across the shoulders. The stove clock in the kitchen, glimpsed on the way in, had flashed the same repeating structure. Cherry hadn't wanted to make too much of it. Now the deck answered with the same architecture. Not coincidence exactly. Not miracle either. Instruction. Foundation is already under you. Stop waiting for the perfect sign to begin. Cherry smiled then, but without softness. This was how the chamber preferred to bless, by removing excuses. The number card was set above the others, like a hinge. Then came the purple deck. Messages from the universe felt warmer in the hands than the others, which was ridiculous, but true. Cherry opened it, and the first card arrived almost without shuffling, as if it had been waiting near the top with practiced restraint. The message was not sentimental. That relieved Cherry immediately. No syrup, no false halo, just a line that landed in the body like a hand at the center of the back. You do not need more permission than the work itself. Cherry read it twice. Somewhere in the apartment, the kettle clicked a second time, impatient now. Still Cherry did not move. The words had gone beyond thought and into structure. Something in them locked with the T card and the number card and made a shape. No more hiding behind preparation. No more waiting for a cleaner omen. No more asking the sky to approve what the spine had already agreed to. Only one deck remained. Cherry reached behind without turning first, fingers finding the dark box by touch. Messages of cosmic. This one came cold. Not literally. Vastly. The card Cherry drew from it was all darkness edged in impossible color, like the inside of a storm that had learned how to think. There was no comfort in the image, but there was scale. The kind that made private fear feel both ridiculous and understandable at once. Cherry sat very still. The message did not come as a sentence at first. It came as perspective. The chamber is small. The work is not. Then the sentence formed. If you can hold stillness in a room, learn to hold it in destiny. Cherry let out a breath that seemed to start behind the ribs. There it was. Not a reading. A command structure. 6 decks, 6 corrections, 6 walls of the chamber now speaking in one voice. Root. Track. Tell the truth. Read the pattern. Take the message. Endure the scale. Cherry looked at the 6 cards arranged before the mat and felt something rare and hard settle into place. Not certainty. Certainty was brittle. This was alignment. A different substance entirely. Cherry finally rose, went to the kitchen, poured tea into the plain white cup, and carried it back carefully with both hands. Steam lifted between body and cards, turning the room briefly into something temple-like before the thought could become self-important. Cherry set the cup down, returned to the mat, and began the first integrated form. Forehead to floor for the unseen ones. 7 tracked steps for the animal. 3 hissed exhales for the truth. 4 measured breaths under the number. 1 upright pause beneath the universe's instruction. 9 heartbeats of stillness under the cosmic sentence. By the end of it, the chamber felt less like a room than a sealed hour cut out of ordinary time and sharpened into purpose. Cherry sat with tea and journal. This was where the old routine would once have ended. Insight gathered, body steadied, perhaps a page of notes, perhaps a line to remember. Not anymore. The law was clear. No leaving the chamber without one real act. Cherry uncapped the pen. For a moment the page stayed white. Not because there was nothing to say, because the body recognized the threshold for what it was. Once this next thing was written, the chamber would no longer be a place Cherry visited for maintenance. It would become a place that demanded consequence. Cherry wrote anyway, not a reflection, not a summary, a beginning. This chamber was built to rescue time from waste. Then it taught me that time is not what must be rescued. Attention is, truth is, action is. Cherry stopped and looked at the lines. The T-card burned quietly at the edge of vision, hiding behind preparation. Not anymore. Cherry turned the page and wrote a title across the next one in slow, unornamented letters. The Time Chamber Lifestyle below it. Book 1. The hidden coil. The room went so still Cherry could hear the